All right, so to start off, we had a question sent on this week, and we also had it come through on our support side as well about using this CurveLathe brush right here. So I'm just going to talk about using this and some functionality of it and how it works inside of ZBrush. So the first thing I'm going to do is just going to select a plain 3D object here over in the tool palette, and I'm just going to turn this into a Polymesh 3D object, and then I'm going to turn my polyframes on so you guys can see what this looks like. And then I'm going to go to the brush palette over here, and I'm going to select that CurveLathe brush. Now, the CurveLathe brush allows you to draw a shape, and then it will lathe that shape around a center point. So it allows you to create geometry. So as an example of this, I can click on one part of the mesh here and draw this out, and then draw all the way up to the top. And when I release, I'm going to get this shape out of it. So what this brush is doing, it's generating the shape between the start of your click and the end of your click. And that is always going to be the middle line of your lathe here. So if I draw this out and do something like this, you can see this is the end, and then that starts way down the bottom, so it's going to give me this shape. And then, of course, this shape did some overlapping across that center line there, so I'm going to get some flipped faces around there. So you just want to make sure that it's going to look at your start, drag it out, and then it's going to look at your end, and that's going to be the center of it, and it's going to give you a shape out of it. Now, the few things with this, so the question we had about this was, since it's a curve brush, can I draw really sharp angles? Well, it is a curve brush in name, but it's handling more like a lasso tool. So you can see here, as I draw this out, it's looking more like a lasso. So if I go and say select the clip, or the select lasso brush, or even say the, we'll just do the clip curve brush here. And say I get the clip curve brush, and this one you may consider it as a curve brush as well, but when you draw this out, you get this line. And so the question we had sent in was, well, how can I get these like 90-degree angles? So when you're using the clip curve brush, you can double tap Alt, and that will give you a 90-degree angle on that curve. Well, this is a different type of curve, so it's not handling the same way with that CurveLathe brush. So this is just for the clip curve here, where you can get this nice 90-degree angle. If I go and change this curve to this lasso stroke, then this is going to give you more of what you're getting with that CurveLathe stroke. So just right out the gate, the strokes are different, and this lasso mode is not going to allow you to get those 90-degree angles the same way you can if you had the curve stroke. And these strokes here, these ones you can change from curve and lasso, are only available on these control and shift brushes. So these brushes through here. So when you go to a sculpting brush like the CurveLathe brush and you go to your stroke palette, you're going to see you're not going to get those curve options. So you're not going to be able to change how the CurveLathe works. It's always going to work as a more of a lasso mode rather than a clip curve mode. So that is going to determine, that's why you're not going to be able to get those harsh angles. If you double tap, you're not really doing anything. You're just starting and stopping to getting those angles there. Now with this as well, so let's say you drew out your curve. So we do our start and we draw this out. We're going to get past the, let's redo that again because that was a little messy there. So we get our curve here. Now what controls the resolution of what we just drew, right? So you can see right through here we have our stroke. And this stroke here right now is generating a lot of topology in this area. And this is based around your draw size. So as you hover over a curve, you're going to see your stroke is going to change to blue, and then when you're outside, it's red. So blue, red, blue, red. The blue area, if you adjust the draw size on this, is the distance in which you will affect that curve. So you can see as I come in here and affect it, I'm affecting a small area. And if I enlarge this, I'm affecting a large area. And this works the same way with all the curve brushes. So they all have these two different UIs. As you hover over the curve, you get one, and then as you're off the curve, you get another. Now when you're off, this is your draw size. So if you change this, you're going to see your draw size slider is going to change here, and it's also going to change at the top. And when you click on this curve, it's now going to update to that draw size. So a larger draw size is going to give you a larger distance between these curve points. And when you use this CurveLathe brush, it's going to give you less geometry. So you can see as I increase this draw size and click on the model here, I'm getting less geometry on my model. So if you want a harsher result on your mesh or not as much topology, just make sure that draw size is large when you're using the CurveLathe brush. And then when you click on it, it's going to update like this. So that is really the only control you have on the density of it. It's just based through the draw size. Now, the other question we had that was sent in with this was, well, how can I get these harsh edges? It seems to always bend. And that is just the byproduct of the curve system. So if you draw these out, it's always, even if they're a full angle, so you can see like this angle right here I just did, and I release it, it's always going to bend. So it's always going to apply this kind of bend process to it. So you can try to manipulate these by using this blue option here and trying to get these a little bit harsh. So that will allow you to kind of come through and do that. But what I recommend is after you make these shapes, just go through, say, with the clip brush. So if I just make this shape quick and then come up here and delete this stroke, now I could come through and say, just isolate this part here. And now I can select that clip curve brush. And now I can come through and say, go like this on the top there, and it's going to clip that and give me that flat surface. And then I can do the same for the bottom, and that's going to give me those angles. Now you can also use this CurveLathe brush with framing, so you can frame your mesh around that. So I'm going to go grab a plain 3D object here and scale this down. And now I'm going to convert this to a, well, before I convert it to polymesh, I'm going to initialize tab here, and I'm going to put my align to Y. So this is going to make that plane sit right on the floor grid. So if I turn on my floor here, you can see it's now generated like this, and if I turn on align Y, it's now going to be on the floor, like so. So we want to make sure we have align Y on, and then we're going to click Make Polymesh 3D. So now I have a new plane, and this plane is now sitting on the floor. So what I'm going to do with this plane is first I just want to frame it, right? So I'm going to come up to the stroke palette up here. I'm going to dock this to the side, and I'm going to click this Frame Mesh button. Now the frame mesh is handy because you can come through and set it to frame on different parts of your mesh. So you can have it set frame on borders, polygroups, or creased edges. And when it does this, and you click this button, you're going to see it's going to generate a curve around that area. Now with this curve, you'll notice that you'll have one circle spot, and this is where the curve connects. Now most of the time, this is going to try to generate that circle spot around the 0, 0 of the world. So you can see this spot right here up in the corner. It's giving me the world origin there, and you can see it's at almost the 0, 0, 0 point. So it's going to try to find that corner is pretty much where your starting spot's going to be when you do a frame mesh. Now there's no way to control that starting spot initially just by clicking frame mesh, but you can edit it, which I will show you here in a minute. So what I want to do is I want to make a shape out of this plane and then use this frame mesh, which will give me this curve, and then I can click this CurveLathe brush and click on the curve, and it'll update that curve with that lathe effect. So this is going to give me a little easier method of controlling the curve lathe. So what I'm going to do is I just need to start hiding parts of this polygon here. So I'm first just going to delete this curve since I'm not ready for that yet. And I'm just going to trim off part of the side. So I'm going to hold Control and Shift and make sure I have the select rectangle selected here. I'm going to drag it out and hold Alt and just hide that part there. And I want this to basically be my area in which the part's going to rotate around. So you can see I had that dot here when I did that frame mesh. So I'm just going to trim it off just a little bit. So I have a little excess border over there. And then I'm going to come through and just modify this side. So maybe I want some sort of curve shape like this. And you can modify this any way you want. I'm just doing this quickly with just the Control and Shift, select rectangle, and just hiding parts of the mesh. Now after I have these parts hidden, I can come over here and click Frame Mesh, and what Frame Mesh is going to do now, it's going to look at the borders, or the polygroups, or the creased edges on this mesh. Well, since I don't have any polygroups, only one polygroup here, and I don't have any creased edges, what it's going to use is the borders. So if I come over here and click Frame Mesh, you see it's going to generate a curve around this entire surface. And you can see here is that start point again, which is trying to get to that 0, 0, 0. So now I can unhide the rest of my mesh with Control and Shift and clicking off. And you can see that curve is still there. So I have a curve that's following all the way around that part. So now if I grab this CurveLathe brush and I simply click on the curve, it's going to look at the start and the end, which is right here, and it's going to rotate around this position. So pretty much it's going to rotate around this axis. So if I click here, I'm now going to get this shape. So you can see now I have generated that shape. So I used the frame mesh to come through and establish where I wanted that curve. And then I framed it, which gave me the design pattern here. And then I used the lathe, clicking on the curve, to wrap that shape around that circular element. So If you want this to be less topology, you can now come over and change the red circle here to a larger draw size and then click, and that will update that curve, and you can start seeing how you can generate shapes like that. Now, another thing you can do with any curves is you can edit the curves, right? So by default, if you just have this in normal mode, when you hover over a curve, you'll get this faint line that will appear. Let's see if I can see this any better. There you go. So you can see this line, and this will allow you to modify it, so you can add length to it. And this will work with any of the curve options. But let's say you want to subtract parts of your curve or decrease length, or maybe I want to determine where this start and end point are. Like maybe I want the start and end point to be like here and here. So how can I edit this curve after I've framed it or drawn it out on my mesh? So the curves are going to stay active between any brushes that you have a curve mode that can be active with them. So if I come over here and say select the ZBrush or Guides brush, you can see the curve modes are still active on the mesh, even though I changed my brush. So the ZBrush or Guides brush is going to allow me to do this modification of lines or of the curves inside of ZBrush here. So if I click on the mesh and drag this out, I can start adding curves. Now what I want to do is I want to say have the start point here and have the end point here. So instead of having them bumped together, I want them one up here and one down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break this line up. So I'm going to come down here and break this one up as well. And now I have this kind of broken system. So I've just taken the ZBrush curves and drawn another curve in between. So now I have separated this into multiple curves. So instead of this being one consistent curve that goes all the way around, it now has a break. So it has a break right here and a break right here. Now with the ZBrush Guides, if any area where you have a break, if you hold down Alt and then drag over that curve, it'll delete it. So that process again is as long as it is one curve. So you can see this is one curve, this is one curve, this is now one curve. This is one curve, this is one curve, and then I have one curve going all around the corner. If you hold down Alt with the ZBrush Guides brush and drag it over top of one of those solid curves, it will remove that curve. So you can see it has removed the curve in between these areas. And you can use this process to shorten any curve strokes you've drawn. So if you have just normal curve brush, you can use this process as well. So I'll show that here in a minute. So now that I've removed that middle part, I can now clean up these other ones. So holding down Alt, clicking across that, holding down Alt, clicking across that, and do the same for the bottom here. And now I have modified my curve. So now I have a clearly defined start and end point. And now I can say go back to that CurveLathe brush and click again, and it's now going to give me that shape. So that is another way you can come through and modify your curves with the ZBrush Guides brush, and then go in and manipulate that area there. I'm gonna see if there's any. We got some people that have not seen that before, so that's good. All right, so you can edit curves. All right, so that is the other process you can do with the lathe brush there. Now, just to go back to the editing of the curves thing, let's do it quickly with just a curve brush. So I'm gonna go to stroke, and I'm just gonna delete my curve here. And now I'm gonna select, say, the curve strap snap. We're going to get it right here. And I'm going to draw this out of my mesh. Now, once again, the size of this is going to be determined by your draw size. So if you increase your draw size and click on the curve, it'll update. You set it down low and it'll update. And that's pretty much your only control you're going to have on that curve. So the smaller draw size is going to give you more points on the curve to mess with, and your larger draw size is going to give you less points. So that is all the changeable properties you have for the curve. Now, after you have this curve drawn out and you just have this one brush here, let's say I want to extend this. So hover over this area here. You're going to see this line, this red line here, and this is going to allow you to extend it. So you got to be pretty close to one of the ends, and you'll see it like highlight and give you this line. And then this will allow you to able to add to it. So you can come through and add to that stroke. So the process again is after you have a curve drawn out, just go to one of the endpoints and hover over it until you get the line, and then click and drag, and that will extend the curve. Now let's say I want to edit the curve. So maybe I drew it out a little bit too far. I want to shorten it. So I can come over here and switch back to that ZBrush Guides brush. I'm going to draw a curve directly across the area I want to shorten. So this area right through here. And now I have split this into one curve, two curves, three curves, and four curves. And now I can hold Alt, erase, erase, and erase. And now I have shortened that curve. And I can go back to my curve strap brush and click there. And as long as I haven't changed my draw size, it's now going to just update the length on that curve. So that is one way you can go through and control the length of the curve. So say you drew it out, but it's not long enough. And also you can come through and shorten it if you drew it out a little bit too far. So a little bit of tidbits there. Now, when you're using that CurveLathe brush, so this is one more thing, and then we'll get to the questions here. So making those shapes that we saw. So there is another way you could possibly do this that may be a little better for you guys. So you can definitely use a Z-modeler brush. It's really easy to take a cylinder and start extruding edges and faces. But you can also come over here to the tool palette and open this up, and let's select this Sweep Profile 3D. Now this is a standard primitive inside of ZBrush, so any primitive you have that has this 3D after it is going to give you this initialize menu, and all these primitives here have different initialize menus. So we want this Sweep Profile 3D. I'm just going to select that, and this is what this object looks like. Now this is in a 3D tool mode, so what this means is right now you're not going to be able to do any sculpting on it, so it's just a primitive. But if we go to the tool palette and go down to the bottom here to this initialize tab, you're going to see you can have these different options here, and you can change how this primitive is going to look, and then you can turn it to a polymesh, and then you can paint on it, sculpt on it, do whatever you want to do. So down here we have some sliders, and we can change this. So if we want to change the divides, we can do that. We can change the V divides. We can change the thickness and the sizes as well. Now, in addition to those sliders down here, this primitive here, this Sweep Profile, has two graphs. So we can open this up, and in here we have a graph here. And what this graph is doing is it's basically doing that same process that that CurveLathe brush was doing. So think of this as your start and your end, and this is what you're getting on the side. So you can see that curve is directly correlating to what we're seeing on the mesh here. So if I come over here and manipulate this, you're going to see that shape update, right? So you can come over here, and if I wanted to make a lathe shape, I could use this primitive instead of the CurveLathe brush. Now, in the graph here, there are a few things that are kind of tricky, or kind of hidden, rather. So one you'll notice here is that all these curves right now kind of have this bend, right? So they have this kind of smooth fall off, and then you have this circle, and you can change this, and this will kind of determine the angle there. But you'll notice that even at the smallest resolution here, it's not really going to give you a 100% harsh edge. So in order to change one of these dots inside the graph to a hard edge versus a soft edge, you just need to take the dot, hold, click down and hold, drag off, and then drag back on, and that will change how that dot is being affected. So this dot right here now has a harsh edge, and this one has that soft edge. So if I don't want it to be soft, click and hold, drag off the graph, drag back on, and now it's a hard-edged hard-edged point. So now I can come through and say manipulate this, right? So I can come through and take this, maybe add this point here, bring this down, do this, you can add some more stuff in here. So you can see you can use this to generate those shapes instead of using that lathe brush. Now another thing that's a little bit tricky is, well, how can you delete a point? So say I added a point and now I want to delete it. So to delete a point, just click and drag off and then release, and that's going to allow you to delete. And then to add, you just click, and then if you don't like that point, click, drag off the graph there, and it's going to be removed. And then to change how the point will be handled, it's going to be hard or soft, just click drag and then drag back on, and it'll change it from a hard or a soft point. So a little bit of a graph tidbit there that will hopefully help. So you can definitely come through and use this. We also have a T profile, which is going to be the thickness profile. So if you enable thickness here, down the bottom here, you can open this profile up, and this is going to determine, well, if I can find my side with the thickness here. It's here somewhere. Where are you? Well, it should be giving me thickness. I swear this works. I broke it. But you can modify this, and this will give you your thickness profile as well, which will start generating a hole in the center of the mesh here and give you thickness around that area. Now you can also copy and paste between graphs. So if I copy this part of the graph here and then go to the T profile, I can paste that in. So if I want the thickness to be exactly the same way on the one side, and this should be working. I don't know what I did. I broke it. I have broken it. But this will give you thickness as well with this shape, and it will give you like the hollowed out form of this spindle asset here if you like it. So that is using the initialize menu to get a CurveLathe type structure. All right, so Let's see here. We're going to get to these questions now. Let's see what we got here. We got an image. Let me check this out quick. If it works. Come on, image. So one question is, using Fibermesh, when I export the BPR, I get no anti-aliasing on the Fibermesh, and there is a image attached which has the fibers and then an anti-aliased version and a non-anti-aliased version. So the controlling of how your anti-aliasing happens is going to be based on a few things inside of ZBrush here. One is this SPix distance right here. So if this is high or low, this is going to change how the anti-aliasing happens. So if you're not getting any, I'd recommend cranking this up a little bit to say, 3 is usually the default, but you could have toggled that off. And if it's a low anti-aliased version, then you're going to definitely get that disconnect on the pass there. But it should be anti-aliasing as long as that is on. So that's definitely a thing. If you're still having issues with it, and this slider is not changed, definitely submit a ticket to support, and we'll look into a little bit further with you to try to get that figured out for you. Next question is displacement map and exporting it out. It's only exporting a PSD. This might be another one that you may have to send into support there. I hardly use the displacement process in here, so the question is asking about using the multi-map exporter here and using the displacement modifier. So this is another one that's, I can't say that I use the multi-map exporter all that much for displacement generations. So I'm happy to look at your files and see if I can figure it out. But if you send it to some support, they're going to have a better answer for that for you. It's one of the few plugins where it's like, I don't have the 100% answer on that, just because I don't use it all that much for those processes. Paul's much more knowledge on the multi-map exporter there. So, but it should be allowing you to get a PSD out, and you should be able to open that inside of Photoshop. So if it's not readable, then it may be something else. But it should be working for you. So another question we have here is, when using ZModeler, is there an option to extend one face? So, okay, let's see here. Let's first just take the thing here and do a Q-cube. And I think I know where you're going with this question here. So here with the ZModeler brush, I just have a Q-cube here, and the ZModeler brush is context sensitive. So if you hover over a face, a edge, or a point, and you press spacebar, you're going to get a different menu for these. Now these menus may look complex, but they're really, really not that complex. Once you start using this, it's very easy to use, and you're probably only going to be using a few of these actions up at the top here, and you're just going to know in your mind, which one to go to. And then the bulk of the stuff here is this targets. So all these menus have these targets, and these is more of the confusing aspect here, but it's more just setting how you want this effect at the top to be applied. So you have QMesh action, and I have this set to a single poly. This is only going to perform this QMesh action to one polygon. If I have the QMesh action selected and I have all polygons, it's now going to perform it to all polygons. And then if you have, say, the QMesh action and you have it set to flat island, it's now going to perform it to one flat island. So that's one flat area of geometry. So really the actions at the top and the targets are only just tailoring to how you want to do that process. And most of the times you can use this with a single poly. So if I QMesh in a single poly and I want to tag multiple faces, I can hold down Alt and then click and drag, and that'll allow me to apply this temporary polygroup. And then if I QMesh now on any of these, it's going to also apply to any of those areas that had that white polygroup on it. So don't get too confused with the ZBrush. It's very powerful, and it's really not all that complex. It just looks complex when you open it up. So don't be scared of it. Get in there and start messing with it. It works really well. So the question is asking about when using the ZBrush. So you extruded one face, and then you want to extrude another one and have it be the same as the other extruded face. So the geomesh action is going to have this snapping effect. So if I drag this poly out, and then I come to this one and I start dragging, you're going to see it's going to start snapping, right? And as you do this, you can kind of control how much of this it has, and then you can keep going and it'll snap to the top. Now the snapping aspect, or the strength of the snapping, is going to be determined by your draw size. So if you have a large draw size and I click and drag, you're going to see that snapping is going to happen faster. And if I have a small draw size and click and, well, it's the opposite. Small draw size and I click and drag, it's going to happen fast. So you can see I can come through and it's now doing this extremely fast. So if I just click and drag out, it's going to pop. And if I have a large draw size and click and drag, it's going to go slower. So that might be one thing that's affecting the increase of that on how you get that edge to snap to the other. Now this process should always snap as long as you have QMesh and you have a poly that you're going to that has a flat surface. Now this will not snap, say if you have an area in the middle that's kind of this weird kind of shape. So let me just add some edge loops here, and let me pop this one up. Now at this spec here, right? So this one's attached, so I can get it to match that point. This one's not attached. So you can see it's not going to snap because it doesn't have any correlating geometry next to it. So if I do this one, it'll snap. But this one, since it's not connected to another one, it's not going to snap to it. So in order to get, say, this one here to be this height, and then I want to repeat that over here, what you need to do is just do the replay option, which will happen with any of the ZModeler functions, and all you have to do to get that to happen is just simply click. So if I drag this out at, say, this height, and I want this now here at the same height over here, so I want to do this one the same height, just simply click, and that will do that now at the same height. And this can be repeated anywhere, so I can do it there, I can do it over there, I can do it here, I can do it here, and you can see they're all going to be at the same height. But the snapping function is there. It should work as long as you're in QMesh. Make sure your draw size is at a smaller size there, and that will determine how fast that snap happens. And then if it's at a larger draw size, this may be the issue where you're seeing it's not snapping as quick. So you can see now I have this disconnect in here, so it didn't snap. But if I draw size is small, you'll see it's going to snap a lot faster. So just check that. There is also an option down here that you may have toggled. So if you have QMesh and down at the bottom you have modifiers, down here you have a weak attraction and a no attraction. So if it's on no attraction, it will not attract to that other polygon and snap to it. And also, if you're not using QMesh, you may be using Extrude. And Extrude will give you the functionality that looks like QMesh, but it's not going to snap. So sometimes you may not want to snap two polygons together. So if I had QMesh on and was doing it on this one here, you see I'm going to get that snap. But if I don't want it to snap, I can switch to the Extrude and then draw that out, and now it's not going to snap. So I don't know if that answers that question there, but it is in 4R7, is in ZBrush, and it is in 4R7. So that is when the ZModeler brush came out, it was 4R7, so it's definitely, the snapping should be there. So give me a shout out if that potentially fixes it for you. So let's see what other questions we got here. I see Ashley's in here. So quick save crashes. This is definitely more of a support thing. You could have something just backed up in your system. Basically, there's a data folder, ZBrush data folder that you can get rid of. Don't do this right now. Go to support and do it. Because the last time last Twitch session, I was giving advice on compatibility issues, and I ended up breaking licenses. And then I got a whole bunch of support emails after that on don't tell people to change your compatibility. So we're not going to do that. So definitely, if your quick saves are crashing, if it's a specific file or anything like that, make sure you definitely hit up support. And that website again is just support.pixologic.com. Let's go over here and show you guys that again. So just go to support.pixologic.com, and then you can click on submit a ticket up here at the top, and then submit that ticket, and definitely send the information about the quick saves and the crashing. And if it's isolated to one file, that will help as well, and especially if it's repeatable. So then that is something that we can potentially look at and hopefully solve on your system. So support.pixologic.com. All right, back to ZBrush here. So another question on ZModeler, so extending or extruding an edge. So what I'm assuming you're talking about here, because we do get this question quite a bit, is when you have, say, geometry like this, and you want to now take this edge and extrude it out, right? So there is no way to do that with the ZModeler brush and single edges. Now, there are a few tricks you can do to kind of get this process to happen. So one thing you can do is, if you have ZModeler brush selected, you can definitely add an edge loop here, and then you can do a mask, and then hold Control and click it and switch to the move brush, and then you can move this out with the move transpose line and use this kind of process. You can also duplicate with the move transpose line here. If I can get this to work here, I don't know if it'll work with edges though. I lied. So yeah, so that is one process that I have done a few times. So coming through, masking everything that you don't want to move, and then using transpose and moving it out, and then you come in and add, say, another line with the ZModeler brush and do that same process over and over. The other way that's a little bit faster, and that I prefer doing, at least with this, because we can't just simply extrude just a single edge, is just give your shape a little bit of thickness. So I'm going to hover over one of these polys here. I'm going to go to QMesh. I'm going to select my target to all polygons, and I'm going to just give that some thickness there. And now with thickness on this, let me just delete these guys here, I can now just keep extruding this face, right? So I can extrude this out again. You know, you can start bending this and rotating around, because even single-sided stuff inside of ZBrush, when you go to an orthographic view, you're going to get this, right? And you can't see it. So definitely, even just that little bit of thickness, just adding it on there is going to allow you to see stuff in ortho view, and it's going to also allow you to give you this functionality of the QMesh function. So I can come in and start adding edge loops, tailoring stuff down, and then if I want, you know, harsher angles, I can come in and delete edge loops like this and modify and taper stuff. Now, if you want it back to that single-sided polygon after you do your process with QMesh to get that shape, now I just come through and delete half of it, right? And now you have that single-sided strip. So that's a little workaround for you for trying to get the extruded edge type process that you'd have in, say, 3D Studio Max. So you just need to give your shape a little bit of thickness. You can do it even with, you know, say, different polygroups. So if you QMesh all polygons again, and while you're doing this and dragging it out, if you tap Alt, it'll change the polygroup color here. So you can definitely do that. And now it's going to give you a separate polygroup for this extruded side than you had on the other side. And so now you can do your modifications with the process here, and then come through and say, now I want to get rid of that, and you come through and isolate those polygroups out. So little tricks on that, but there is no way to extrude an open edge. So you have to have a solid edge, and then you can use the QMesh action or even the transpose line with masking. So any unmasked area, and if you hold Control and Shift and drag out, you're going to drag this out, and so now you can repeat the edge like this, but your shape has to have thickness in order to happen. So this process here may also be just useful. So if you have your polygons, mask out part of your shape, I usually hold Alt and then click off again to invert the mask. So now I just have this area unmasked. Now I can switch to the Move Transpose line. You want to grab this inner circle here, hold down Control and drag out. You can hold down Shift to lock it to the axis, but Control and drag out is the hotkey there. And this will allow you to extrude that edge, and then you can just keep doing this. So you can come through and just keep extruding this out, and then come through and rotate it if needed. Go back to Move, Extrude, Extrude, Extrude. And that'll kind of give you that drag functionality of holding Shift and dragging an open edge inside of Max. So, not the perfect answer. The paintbrush, can I get some more elaboration on the paintbrush? Just painting inside of ZBrush. So this is the professional version of ZBrush, and ZBrushCore has a brush that's just called Paint. ZBrush, the professional version, just does not have that yet. Next release will probably have that in there. But for painting on meshes inside of ZBrush, you can grab any brush, and the base principle for this is you just need a mesh. So here I have the demo head here. And the amount of detail or density you're going to get when painting is going to be directly related to how many polygons your mesh has. So if I have the demo head here and he's really low, and I have the standard brush selected, first just want to fill them with, say, like the color white. So I'm coming to the color here. Make sure RGB's on, go to color at the top, and whatever color swatch you have here, go to color fill object. It's going to take that and now fill the vertices of your model. So colorize and polypaint is vertex color. That's the whole thing of it. So it's just named a little bit differently. So now that I have this model entirely filled with white, I can now come here and say select another color. If I don't want sculpting to happen while I'm painting, just turn off Z add. And now if I draw on this model here, you're going to see I'm able to paint on the surface. Now the topology or the density of your topology is going to determine how clear this painting is going to be. So right now this mesh only has 4,000 points. So I don't have a lot of these vertexes to hold this polypaint information. So you can see it's going to give me this nice kind of soft effect, but it's probably not what you're looking for. So what you want to do is you want to increase your model's topology, and the number of vertices is directly going to relate to this. And then when you paint with paint on a model with higher polygons counts here, you're going to get a cleaner line. So you can see the difference between these. And then if I even divide the demo head up even more, so let's get them up to say 3 million, and now I paint on them, you see I'm going to get a lot cleaner stroke. Now your focal shift on this will also determine the fall off on the edges of that. So with focal shift at -100, I'm getting this effect. And you can play with this here to get a cleaner stroke there. And you can see where this is breaking a little bit through here. So you can see it's kind of smooth, and then we got some stair stepping and then a little bit smooth. This is all related to your topology as well. So if your topology is not even, you're going to get an inconsistent stroke. So you can fix this by dividing your mesh up more or converting it to, say, a dynamesh, and dynamesh is going to go through and make all your whole surface even topology. And so you can do that, and then that surface is going to be even, and then when you paint on it, you should get a more consistent result. And you can also just change the fall off there to kind of hide up those anomalies. But that's the whole process for painting. So just make sure you have RGB on. You can pick any brush to do this with. One brush that's really cool with painting is this Trim Adaptive brush here. And this Trim Adaptive brush has some flattening fall off nature to it. So if you turn off the sculptural aspect and just turn on RGB, you can come through and paint areas, and you can see it's going to snap kind of to the edges or surfaces of your mesh. And then also Trim Dynamic is another fun one to use with painting. Let me find that here. Turn off the sculpting properties, go back over to RGB, and you can see this is going to give you this effect. So it's only painting in really the cavity areas of your mesh. So if you have a lot of surface noise or sculptural details, you see it's only going to find those high areas and paint those, and it's going to skip that low area there. So you can get it to paint on the low areas eventually, but for the most part, it's always going to just try to find those high zones on your mesh, and gives you different painting results as well. So here we have, this could be Paul's superhero costume for Halloween. I'll tell him he can be Blue Poly Paint Man. Oh, fun times. Fun times. Yeah, so just add thickness to the edge loop, and hopefully that'll help there. So, question from Run. It's getting a weird bug. The ZBrush inverts all his brushes when clicking. They shouldn't be inverting unless you're changing this stuff up here. Now, they will invert if you hold down the Alt key. So if I have, say, the clay build-up brush selected, what the Alt functionality does when you're sculpting on the mesh is you hold down Alt, it's going to carve in. So that's basically flipping this up at the top. So make sure your brushes aren't somehow saved or changed to be in Z sub, because now it's going to sculpt inward, and then if you hold Alt, it should sculpt positive. But they shouldn't all be getting inverted or there's nothing that really you should be hitting that making you do that other than pressing Alt on your keyboard or changing these options here. So if it's still happening and that's not the solution for Z-add, just changing Z-add or Z-sub, definitely submit that to support. Yeah, if they're all inverted, is it doing with insert mesh brushes too, or just any of the sculpting stuff? Yeah, it potentially submit to support.pixologic.com and see if we can get it looked at for you. Yeah, it shouldn't be doing that unless you're holding Alt. It should not be inverting. So unless you could have inverted alpha, but there isn't anything that you're hitting that should there's no processes that will magically do that, or that's like a feature. So that sounds more like an issue. So back to the paintbrush here. So alpha and rolling to repeat a design on your mesh. So we do have some roll brushes. Let me just reload Mr. Demo Head here because he's looking really pretty. And take him again, fill him with RGB color here. So back to the painting option here, we had a little follow-up question on this, and this was when using the paintbrush or using a brush to paint, say I will have an alpha and I want to roll the design across my mesh. So if you go to Lightbox by pressing comma or pressing this Lightbox button up here, in here you can go to this brush area here, and in here we have a bunch of different brushes that aren't in the brush menu here by default. So a lot of the brushes, maybe you had one that you really liked, say in like 4 or 6, and then you got 4 or 7, you're like, where'd that brush go? It's probably in this folder. And in here you have a whole bunch of stuff, and one of these we have is this folder called Tracks. And if you open this up, there are a few brushes in here that have this kind of track effect. And so to load these, you can just come over here and double click, and this will give you a Tracks brush. So if I take this brush here and sculpt on my model, you'll see it's going to take this alpha and it's going to repeat it in this process here. Now the quality of this is once again going to be determined by the amount of polygons on your mesh. So if I divide this up a little bit and now drag this out, you can see I'm going to get this result. So what these track brushes can do is I recommend starting with these. So just go to Lightbox, go to this brush area here, and then you want to find this track folder and open this up. And just select one of these guys in here. So Tracks 2 and Tracks 3 are usually the ones that I usually start with if I want to like take a stroke and make it like go across my mesh. So grab one of those. And then after these are loaded in, just double click to load. It'll come over here. Now you can change this to whatever alpha you want. So if I don't want that one and say I want the triangle here, I can come and do that. Now I'm going to get triangles across the mesh here. Now if you want to add color with this, just come over here and set a color. Make sure RGB is turned on. And now when you paint, you're going to get that applied as well. Now you can adjust your focal shift as well to come through and do that. Now one thing to note about when you have a color and you have an alpha applied, ZBrush is always going to apply this alpha as a mask for any of the color values. So if you have this blue, it's going to take your solid blue color and it's going to apply this as a mask. And it's going to do the same thing if we have a texture. So if I come over here and say take this texture of the star, it's going to now override this color that I have down here. It's going to use this as the color instead, and then it's going to apply this as a mask to the color and then apply that to the model. So you can see now I'm getting that star shape and it's applying this color instead of this color, but it's also applying that star shape as with it having this alpha masked as well. So that is one thing there just to take note of when you're using alphas and colors and textures, that it's going to apply the alpha as a mask to whatever texture you have or whatever color you have. Now this alpha has some modifications done to it as well. So you can see if I hover over it, I'm getting this clear result of the arrow, but my preview is giving me this. And if you go to the alpha palette here and go to modify, there's some stuff here that you can modify. So this one has some mid values changed and some radial fade. So this radial fade is giving you this effect around here. So if you don't want that to happen, you just turn that all the way down, and now you're going to get this clean triangle. And now I can turn this texture off, and now drag this across, and you're going to get this result. Now the depth in which this is carving in is going to be controlled by this intensity here. So if you turn that all the way off, you're now going to get no intensity, so no sculptural details. So if you want sculptural, you can have that. If you just want paint, turn that off as well. And now when you drag it out, you're just going to get that repeating alpha with this color applied across the mesh. And so that's just the Tracks 3 brush, and this is pretty much my go-to for this anytime I want to drag a pattern across the surface. It'll give you that result. Now you can modify this as well. If you go to the stroke palette up here and go to your modifiers, there's a roll distance you can play with. And this will just take that alpha and just rolling it like you would with a, say, missing the word, squeegee, spatula, roller thing for printmaking. And so that's all it's doing there. So if you want to increase this, you can say set it to 2. And now when you drag this out, it's going to give you a longer stroke as well. So you can play with that roll distance, but usually by default it's 1, and it's going to repeat this 1 time over and over again. And then you come through and select any alpha you want and just repeat it. So there you go. Let me know if that helps there with that texturing and the usage of kind of rolling it out. So that's just the Tracks 3 brush there. Squeegee spatulas. I can't remember the name of it. It's the things with printmaking where you have they're like rubber rollers. It can't be called rubber rollers. I know there's a name for this. I'm drawing a blank on that. So feel free to put the correct terminology in there. Ashley's always going to call them squeegee spatulas from now on. So for the CurveBridge Brush, it's making a bridge between 2 curves, but it refuses to bridge the 3rd one. So the CurveBridge Brush is always going to bridge just 2. So it's going to bridge curve 1 and curve 2. You're never going to be able to get a 3rd bridge in there. So it's looking at one hole and another hole, and wherever those curves are, it will bridge between them. A brayer. There we go. That's the correct term right there. Thank you, Steve. I couldn't remember what it was called. It's the morning. All right, so let's see what we got here. So yeah, so I can show you the CurveBridge Brush functionality too. Let's go over here and just grab the Sphere 3D object. So this is another one that's pretty handy. I'll just go out of here, get that alpha out of there. So I'm just going to take this sphere here, and I'm just going to turn it into a dynamesh quick. So there we got my dynamesh sphere. Now the CurveBridge brush lives in the brush palette, and it's just this CurveBridge brush here. And so what this allows you to do is allows you to kind of punch holes through your model pretty quick. So I'm just going to take this sphere, and I want to punch a hole in the front, and then punch a hole in the back, and then bridge the geometry in between it. So I'm going to hold Control and just mask out a hole here in the front, and this can be whatever shape you want. And I'm going to rotate around and mask out the back. So something like that, and we'll make this one a little bit crazier. And now that I have these masks applied, I'm going to turn on my polyframes, and I'm going to turn offline. You're going to see that right now my entire sphere is one color. So what I can do with this is I can take this masking and I convert it to a new polygroup and then hide that polygroup. So to take masking and convert it to a polygroup, you can hit Control-W on your keyboard. And what process this Control-W hotkey does is it does this. Where's my masking tab here? Not masking, my polygroup tab. It runs this group mask clear mask. So what this does, it's going to first polygroup whatever's masked, and then it's going to clear the mask. So that's what this button here does, and Control-W is the hotkey for it. So with this, if I hit Control-W, you can see it's going to now give me a new polygroup in those areas. And now that I have a new polygroup, I can use Control and Shift with the select rectangle brush selected, and I can hide that or isolate that piece, and then click it again to hide it, and now I have a hole through my mesh. Now after you have a hole through your mesh, you're probably going to want to delete hidden on that. So I'm going to go back up to the tool palette up here. I'm going to go to the geometry tab. I'm going to open up modify topology, and I'm going to do delete hidden. So that's going to remove that inner part. So now I have a mesh like this. So it has a hole in the front and a hole in the back. Now I would say I want to bridge those two pieces of geometry together, or bridge this hole and the other hole. So I'm going to grab that CurveBridge brush, and I'm going to start drawing this out, which is just going to give you this normal curve shape. And then as I get closer to this edge here, I'm going to hold down Shift, and this is going to snap to that open edge. So now I have framed one of these with one of these curves. And now I need to go and find another curve. So this is only going to bridge between two curves. And I come over here, drag this out, hold down Shift to snap that open edge. And now when I release, it's going to generate topology in between those two curves. So you can see now I have that hole in the middle there generated. So now I come to the stroke palette, I can go to curve functions, I can delete my curve here and clear my mask, and I can come through and say polish this edge up a little bit. And there I now have created a hole in my model. Now another thing with CurveBridge, so creating a polygroup, since it was done by masking, there's another way you can do that polygroup creation with masking. And you can use a edged masked looped border. I think it's what it's called. We're gonna find out here. So I'm gonna mask another part here, and then I'm gonna mask a part. I'll do the hole right here. I don't want them to intersect because it's gonna be craziness. So instead of hitting Control W, which is gonna give me this effect, which has little jaggies around the edges here, I can come over to the edge loop panel here and click this Edgeloop Masked Border button. And what this does, it's gonna apply pretty much that same effect, but it's going to use it as kind of smooth out that mask. And you can see this one has a hotkey too, Control Shift plus E. And if I come over here and click this, it's going to now take that mask, and you can see it's going to apply this border to it. So you can see it has come through and given me a soft transition to that polygroup there. Now you'll notice when you applied it, it didn't do the clear mask, so you want to make sure you clear that mask. But now if I isolate and then hide, you can see I have a nice cleaner border. So instead of that rough one I had originally, when I was just converting that straight geometry to a new polygroup, this process of running Edgeloop Masked Borders is going to apply a group loops basically around that and smooth it out and give you a smoother transition. So now I have that hole there, so now I go to the Modify Topology and delete that. Now I'm going to use that curve brush again, so drag it out, hold Shift, snap one of those open faces, drag it out, hold Shift, snap the second one, and now it's going to bridge in between those two. And then just come to Stroke and do a delete, and you now have that area deleted. So the CurveBridge brush is really handy for high density models. If you have models that are millions of polygons, it's still going to work. If you want another function of bridging holes, you can use the ZModeler brush, but this one's going to really need like that lower ZModeler topology. So you can do that as well. So if I come say and just turn this into a Q-cube quick. Let's turn back on my polyframes here. I'm going to go back to the ZModeler brush, and I'm just going to add some topology here. I want to put a hole in, and I'm going to select these faces with the Alt temporary polygroup, so that's holding down Alt and clicking across those polys. Then I'm going to hover one of these guys, press spacebar, and the ZModeler poly action menu, I'm going to choose delete this time, and I'm going to just keep my target to a single poly. I'm going to delete, and that's going to remove those faces, and I have a hole right through my mesh. I come to the display properties over here and turn on double so I can see that a little bit better. Now if I want to bridge this hole through here, I can hover over one of these edges and press spacebar to go to the edge action menu. Now in here I can choose bridge and then select the target of two holes. And then in here, usually the default settings are pretty good. I can click one of these open edges and then come over here and click the other open edge, and that's going to bridge the topology in between there. So that's another way you can bridge open surfaces. It's still only going to allow you to do two holes though. So you're not going to be able to bridge a third hole in there. Now if you want to punch something crazy through a mesh, like for 3 things, you could use dynamesh subtract for this. So let's say I take the polysphere here. I'm going to convert this to a dynamesh quick, and then I'm going to open my subtool palette here, and I'm going to append in a cylinder object. So cylinder 3D here, and I'm running low on time, so that's why I'm speeding through this. So I apologize, it's a little bit fast here. And I'm going to rotate, or I'm going to scale my cylinder here. Now if you want to repeat a scale process, you can just press 1 on your keyboard and that will repeat it. So that's handy if you have something that's really big and you go to scale and it's only scaling by a little bit amount. You can scale once and just press 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and it'll scale it down fully. And then let's say I now move this just to get a little bit taller. So let's say I have this hole, and then I'm going to duplicate this guy again, and I'm going to rotate this way. And then maybe we'll rotate a little bit like this. Let's see if I can get this to work right. Come on now. Come on. There we go. So let's say I want to take the cylinder, I want to punch these 2 shapes out now. So I can use the dynamesh subtract process to make those holes as well. And so this process involves, first you need to have a tool that has dynamesh active. So I have my polysphere. In the geometry tab here, you can see dynamesh is turned on. And then I'm going to go to the subtool palette here, and I have this cylinder and this cylinder. So I'm going to go to this first cylinder here, and I'm going to set the option here to the subtractive functionality. And I'm going to set this one to subtractive functionality. And then I'm going to take my dynamesh model, I'm going to go to the merge process here, and I'm going to click merge down. Now when you do a merge down normally, and you merge into a subtool that just has this set to positive, it's just going to merge those 2 subtools together. Now, if you have this set to this negative option and you perform this merge down, it's going to take this tool here that you're merging into, and it's going to change its polygroup to this white subtractive polygroup. And so what this means is that after you do this merge, so if I merge these down like so, and I turn on my polyframes here, you can see I have this effect. And let me just hide this one here quick. So I have the blue sphere, and then I have that cylinder as this white polygroup. So now that I have this white subtractive tool in here, the next time I read dynamesh, dynamesh is going to subtract that part out. Now, if you don't, you can, now instead of just doing this merge down, you can also apply this polygroup in the polygroup tab. So if you ever wondered what this group as dynamesh sub option was, it's going to do the same thing. So if you have a mesh that's dynamesh and you append another object, you can then select that object, group that object as dynamesh sub, and the next time you dynamesh, it's going to subtract out that white area. So I can just redynamesh now with this cylinder, and it's going to take that white polygroup and subtract it. And now I'm going to get a hole through that mesh there. Now I can repeat this process again. So just make sure you have a mesh that is in dynamesh mode. You have a tool that's underneath it that is set to subtractive. Do a merge down. So subtool, merge down, and hit OK to that. And then the next time you redynamesh, it's going to subtract that other form out. So now you can see now I have a whole bunch of holes in that mesh there. So that is a way you can get multiple holes inside your mesh. Now it does have to have a dynamesh model, but that may give you the solution you're looking for instead of that CurveBridge brush, because the CurveBridge brush is only going to do 2 holes, but you could use this dynamesh subtract process and start putting holes all over the place. So let me know if that helps there. All right, so I think I got time for one more question here. Let's see what is going on here. So we had a question from John 3D here. He's asking about when he has a high poly sculpt finished and he wants to add or subtract a loop of topology at the lowest subdivision. You use the freeze sub D, and then when you make your edit, it's going to jump back to the high poly, but it usually is severely damaged. So this process shouldn't be going crazy unless you have a lot of intersecting geometry where it could be causing potential issues. But let's just grab Earthquake here. And you can see we got Earthquake, and he's got this high resolution version of himself, and then he has this low resolution version. So let's say on Earthquake here, I want to add a row of topology through here. So say I've sculpted this much on him. He's got textures and color and all sorts of other stuff. But now I decided that I really want to add some sort of detail in here, but I don't quite have enough topology to do it, right? So maybe I wanted to put like some sort of logo, and I just want to add another row of topology. So if we come over here and click this freeze subdivision levels, what this is going to do, it's going to freeze your subdivisions that you have that are higher. So if you come here and click this, you're going to get this. So it's going to look like your low resolution version. Now with the subdivision levels frozen, you can now use any of the processes that inside of ZBrush that require no subdivisions. So say like the Z modeler brush, you could come in and start modeling with the Z modeler brush. Now if you have UVs on your model, I wouldn't suggest doing that because the Z modeler brush will break those areas of UVs because it's not going to conform those to theirs. But let's say I want to just add, say, a row of polygons in here or just divide something up. So I come through here and do this insert option here, and I just insert an edge loop right there. So, now I'm pretty happy with that. Let's just go ahead and we're going to insert another one up here and maybe one down here. Now, after your edit topology is done on this free subdivision version, when you click this off, what ZBrush is going to do, it's going to take this version of your model, and it's going to try to find out which areas weren't changed, and then it's going to project those high resolution versions back down. So it's basically reconstructing your model and then projecting the high resolution details back to this version of the mesh. So if you have a lot of intersecting stuff, when it does this projection, it may overhit it, but usually if it's pretty close, it should hold it. So I'm just going to click unfreeze subdivision levels here, and now this process is going to happen. So it's taking this new topology that I just gave Earthquake here, and it's going up all the subdivision levels and reprojecting this stuff back on it. And as this is done here, you'll see that Earthquake should have parts of him masked out. And if it's masked, it should not have been distorted. So it usually only affects the areas around it. So there we go through here. And most of the times, if it's masked, it should have been able to calculate that stuff 100%. If you're getting a lot of the white areas through there, you can that's usually where it misses. So if you have areas that are missing, which could be done from, just different things when it does the projection. But that is the process there to do that reconstruction. And now you can see I have that extra row topology in there, and it usually does a pretty good job projecting through there. So if you're still getting bad results on that with the projection back there when you're in that free subdivision level mode, sorry, we got little dogs running through here. That may be another one to submit to support and just see if we can look at it. Because it should be working pretty well as long as you don't have a lot of stuff that's overlapping, because it is doing a projection option after you get out of that free subdivision level mode. And if you have topology on top of each other or different intersecting stuff, it could get confused on that projection, and that could be giving you those issues that you're seeing. All right, here. So, see if there's anything else, any last ones here. I think we got them all. Oh, maybe. Earthquake is so sexy. He's totally sexy. All right, guys. Well, I think that's it for this week here. So once again, this was the AskZBrush version of ZBrush Live here. If you have any other additional questions, or I didn't get to your questions, I think I got through all of them today. You had some good ones too. Ones that I could demo on quite easily. So once again, if you have any additional stuff, or I've told you to go submit a ticket for support, just go to support.pixologic.com and click the submit a ticket button. So some of the things we had brought up sounds like they're not workflow issues. There may be something else that's happening. So definitely submit a ticket there. If you have other questions that you want to ask about for AskZBrush stuff here, definitely submit it to Twitter at hashtag AskZBrush. So I can see we already had one submitted here on Fibermesh on both sides of the surface. So I can answer this one quickly since it's right here. You can use masking to do it, but pretty much it's always going to go through the surface like that. So you're always going to have Fibermesh that goes inside, especially if your polygons are single-sided. So there's not really a way to avoid that other than by giving your object some thickness so you don't see it, or masking that backside. But if you have single-sided surfaces, it's gonna do that. So that hopefully, I don't know if you're in here or not, but this one will probably not be a one that I'll end up doing a video on, just because usually I try to do ones that have answers. So that's another thing too. If the answer is no, then you may not get a reply to it. So, but that is it. So definitely this week I'll be hitting up some more of these, and we have more stuff coming up. So I think today I'm the last one for the stream. Once again, if you would like to have a spot on our ZBrush Live channel of events, go to ZBrushLive.com, go to the schedule here, and over in the corner you have this creative supply here. Click that, submit a form in. We would love to have you fill a slot. You can probably choose your time. If you want to come right after this, you can definitely do that. So definitely come over here and click this creative supply button and fill out the form. Today, I'm the last one for today. Tomorrow we have John Troy Nickel and also Ashley, who's in here as well. So Ashley will be on tomorrow. So definitely, she's in here right now. I think she's always on Twitch that I've seen. So definitely check out her stuff. And also, I'm going to you can hit up Ashley for questions too. She may not want me telling you this, but definitely type in the chat while she's going. And if you have any questions or anything that she does, definitely hit her up. So, well, that is it. So thank you all for coming out, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. And stay tuned for more videos and more questions answered on the AskZBrush stuff. So that's youtube.com. Do a search for AskZBrush, and you'll see all the videos there. We're up to 188. We're going to have to do something special when we reach 200. I don't know what that's going to be, but getting close, getting close. All right. Thank you, guys. Take care.